All right, good morning, everybody. I am Jessica Hector Sue, the chair of the committee, and I'm going to call to order the Transportation Committee for Friday, February 25th, 2022, as permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of February 4th, 2022. The determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee. To ensure that the meeting is as transparent as possible, we posted the meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance. We'll provide a recording of this meeting linked on our website, and we'll take all votes by roll call. So we'll go ahead and have Lindsay call the roll.
Okay, great. Do we have someone here for IDOT for Chuck Abraham? I'll skip Darwin Burkhart.
Oh, you have Karen Orgulja is on for Chuck. I saw her waving her hand.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out where my mute button was. Yep, Karen Rogeldew here in place of Chuck this morning. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Is Darwin here, Burkhart? Kevin Carrier?
Here, and good morning, everybody.
Lynette Ciavarella?
Here, good morning.
And for CTA, do we have Mike Connolly or Leah Mooney? John Donovan? Doug Ferguson?
Present.
Is FTA Tony Griep? Nope. Lisa Lawson Stark? Robert Hahn? Jessica Hector Sue?
Here.
John Paul Deepa?
Here.
Tom Kelso? And maybe put it in chat if we can't hear you. Jackie for Kendall County? Forbes?
Here.
Christina Kopkowski?
Here.
Eric Llewellyn?
Here.
Chris Hebert?
Here.
Tara Orban?
Present.
Jessica Ortega?
Here.
Heidi Prasad? For IDOT District 1, do we have either John Basic or Jose Rios? Tom Rickert?
Present.
Mayor Rockingham?
Here.
Joe Schofer?
Here.
Vig Krishnamurthy?
Present.
Chris Snyder?
Present.
P.S. Siraj? Scott Weber? Audrey Wenink?
Here.
Rocco Zucchero, or is it Amy? Neither. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let's move on to agenda item 2, agenda changes and announcements. There are no agenda changes that I know of. Do we have any announcements from anyone? No announcements. I have one announcement, which is that RTA's strategic plan emerging plan elements is out for public comment right now. So please check out the RTA website and look at that and provide comments. All right, seeing no other announcements, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 3, approval of the minutes. We are actually going to take both minutes together, if everyone will indulge us on that. Spare ourselves 2 roll call votes. Do we have any changes to either minutes for December 17, 2021 or February 4th, 2022? No changes. I'm not seeing any. Are we seeing any raised hands?
Mayor Rockingham will approve the minutes of both December 17th and February 4th.
Great, thanks for the motion, Mayor. Can I have a second?
Tom Rickert seconds.
Thanks, Tom. All right, Lindsay, go ahead with the roll call.
Okay, Karen Regulia. Kevin Carrier.
Aye.
Lynette Ciavarella. I think we're hearing Karen.
Sorry, I was looking for mute. Hi.
And can I get a vote from you, Karen? Or abstain?
Hi.
Okay, thanks. Oh, you said aye, not hi. Lynette Ciavarella,
Aye.
Doug Ferguson,
Aye.
Jessica Hector Sue,
Aye.
John Paul Depla,
Aye.
Tom Kelso, Jackie Forbes,
Aye.
Christina Kapowski,
Aye.
Eric Llewellyn,
Aye.
Chris Hebert,
Aye.
Tara Orban, Jessica Ortega,
Aye.
thank you, and Tom Rickert.
Aye.
I see Tom Kelso voted yes in the chat. Mayor Rockingham,
Aye.
Joe Schofer,
Aye.
Big Krishnamurthy,
Aye.
Chris Snyder,
Aye.
Audrey Wennick,
Aye.
and Amy Lee for Tollway.
Aye.
Great. And if I didn't call your name, let me know and I'll record your vote. You can send a chat. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. The motion carries. Both minutes are approved. Let's move on to agenda item 4, CMAQ board meeting updates. And for this, we will have Erin.
Thank you, everyone. I think some notes from the board meeting, but first I wanted to start off with that we've got our USDOT planning certification review of the region happening March 8th through March 10th. So we are actively pulling together materials to answer the list of questions that they've given us. I know that those days are the same days as our board meeting and our MPO policy committee meeting. I imagine that there will be additional opportunities for members of the transportation committee to participate, provide feedback in the conversations, as those of you who have been a part of those conversations in the past will remember. But for those of you who are new, this is something that happens every 3 years where FHWA and FTA come in and jointly look at the work that we're doing across the region. They also look at some of the work that we do jointly with the RTA as well. And we really value our partners' feedback throughout this process. So there'll be opportunities for folks to participate that way. Wanted to share too that we've been working really closely with MHub, who is leading this coalition for an application for the Economic Development Administration's Build Back Better regional competition, focused on developing a clean energy grid. I think there's some really great synergies. So should the state be awarded these resources to really leverage sort of the energy grid and modifications necessary, the workforce needed to bring some of these things that we care about to fruition as it relates to electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging. And so there's a workforce component, there's like supplier components. They've got a number of community-based organizations in place and are working to get some resources from commitments from the state, the county, and the city to support this application. All in all, they, I believe, received $500,000 or $600,000 in the first round grant to really vet out and scope out what this program and project would be. But the second round is really competing for up to $100 million to develop this clean grid technology hub for the region and the state here and interconnecting all those parts. So I think the submittals actually due March 15th, but again, as it relates to the work that we've been doing on EV infrastructure, and I know that you all are beginning to think about as well, or sort of well on that way, we wanted to make sure that you're aware that that's going on because there could be some unique synergies here for us to focus on. This afternoon, too, we are kicking off a forum on electric vehicle infrastructure and really to better understand what our role should be in this. I think one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about is how the system of connected electric vehicle charging infrastructure needs to be a system and not ad hoc developed across our region by some market-driven realities, but really thinking about how we can have a holistic system, how it works for everyone, how we can really focus on that system, making sure that there's opportunity for equity and thinking about communities that might not be at the forefront of the market-driven approach for EV charging, but I think also too, there are opportunities for us to work with our municipal partners and thinking, I know that Mayor Schilke, I'll channel him for a minute, that they put in a charging station and then people just park there, right? And so that one charging station actually isn't really all that effective. So helping our partners think through what are the rules, the regulations, where they should go, all of that sort of good stuff. So we will probably have more to share on that with you as well. I'll be talking a little bit more about our committees and our engagements, so I'm going to skip that update. Let's see. I think you're all probably aware that the governor had his state of the state budget a couple of weeks ago. We again are looking through the annual budget documents. I think of concern to us is really the one-year freeze on the annual based inflation increase in MFT, which would be about $125 million. I think we're concerned about sort of the long-term multiplying impacts that could have on the region. So staff is continuing to look at that and the impacts that it would have on transportation funding here in our region. And then also, we are aware of a bill filed by Representative Delgado in the House and a companion bill filed by Senator Villavelam in the Senate that would require RTA and CMAP to work together, developing a report on the next steps for the future funding of our transit system. So wanted to make sure folks know that we are working, our staffs are working together to think about this, but again, both our agencies have been thinking long and hard about how we develop meaningful strategies for an effective multimodal transportation system here. So a note on that. And then I think maybe my last note to share at this time is that I spent some time in DC meeting with our congressional delegation. We had good visits. I think everyone is really focused on implementation of the infrastructure bill. You know, we have heard that there is an agreement for the full years of appropriation from Congress. It hasn't quite gotten across that finish line yet, but really we need that full year budget in order to receive all of the funds for the new core programs and some of the new competitive programs. So we're keeping a close eye on that, but implementation was top of mind for our legislative delegation and really thinking about, you know, equity, disconnected communities, and how to ensure communities can access some of the resources that will be coming their way. So we shared a number of the projects that we've got going on, our vulnerability assessment, our EV charging forums that will be kicking off, and I think we also shared too that we've been working with this committee, and our goal and intent is really to make sure that our region is coordinated as we begin to pursue some of the competitive funds that will be available. So with that, I think that covers a wide variety of things, but I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any.
Thanks, Erin. Do we have any questions for Erin? Audrey, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Erin. Thanks for that summary. I believe in the last meeting of this committee, CMAP mentioned that you were going to try to be working on convening groups to develop consensus to go after all those federal funds. I just wanted to see if you had any update on what that might look like, given that NOFOs are starting to come out and will be coming out from now on. So if you can share any plans in that regard, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so actually, I will, when I talk about the committee and engagement on agenda item, I think it's 6.02 here this morning, my hope is that we spend the end of that presentation hearing from you about what sort of committees you think that we need to lead around what issue areas. So it's coming. It's coming. We're going to start today. I mean, our staff has really been mapping out, sort of developing a framework of what the opportunities are, and then looking at some of the projects that we know we have in a pipeline. But then we recognize that a number of these new projects don't have a pipeline of projects, and how we're going to have to help support and build that moving forward. So if I could hit pause on that, I will ask for your feedback on that in just a few agenda items.
Hey, Erin, Chris Snyder, real quick. The EV forums that you mentioned are starting, I think you said this afternoon. Is that, I didn't see anything on your website. I don't, is that a targeted audience, or is it something that anybody can log into? Because I know it's something we're looking at our county campus out here in terms of infrastructure needs and hiring a consultant to evaluate our needs.
At this point, I know that there were a number of folks invited to that and that it wasn't sort of a public forum, but right now I think we're just listening and trying to scope, but let me check with the team and see who all,
Okay.
there's some DuPage County on there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Erin and Chris. Any other questions for Erin on her report?
Hey, Erin. Just a quick question, a follow-up. I know you said you're concerned about the freeze. So that's on the TRF, right? The index to inflation. Is that what's proposed to be frozen?
That's correct. Just the index. So not the, the gas tax was doubled and it was indexed. So every year that annual index changes and increases based on inflation. So roughly we think that would be about $125 million if frozen this year. But I think also of concern is the precedent it sets by freezing, having it sort of be not a predictable source of revenue.
Certainly. It's just out of curiosity, when would that take effect? I know it's proposed right now, right? So when would that be effective?
So I will see, but I think this was just in the governor's proposal, and so it hasn't actually been put into the budget that will be voted on. It's just sort of something that he put on the table and that the House and the
Being
Senate.
kicked around.
But I have heard
Okay.
too that there are discussions at the federal level as well of folks thinking that this is another release valve, I'll say, for some of the economic pressures that the country is facing. So we've heard it sort of being discussed at the federal level as well by a small group of stakeholders. I don't think it will get much legs, just given the fact that it really would impact a number of the competitive programs that are now signed into the infrastructure bill.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll keep you posted.
Great. Any other questions for Erin? No. All right. Seeing no questions, let's go ahead and move on to our 2 approval items for today. Item 5.01 is federal fiscal year 2019 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Program amendments and administrative modifications. For this, Russell will be presenting.
Hello. All right, included in your packet today is a memo detailing the 71 TIP changes contained in formal TIP Amendment 22-04 and the 230 TIP changes contained in Administrative Amendments 22-04.1 and 22-04.2. As seen in the memo, formal amendments resulted in a reduction of $887 million in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. As stated in the memo, nearly all the reductions can be attributed to 2 IDOT projects, the I-190 and the I-80 project. Primarily, that was moving funds out of MYB and shoring up the actual funding for each project. Administrative amendments added $153.7 million to the TIP in all prior, current, and future years. Primarily, this came from new projects, including a bunch of projects that involve future bridge repairs on or over I-290. Being added in MYB years of the TIP. The net change for total costs in the TIP from all amendments results in a reduction of $733.3 million in all current, future, and prior years of the TIP. As shown in the memo, cost changes comprised most of the formal changes. Administrative amendments were more evenly distributed among AC and ACC changes and cost changes. The amendments, along with the memo, were posted on February 18th for committee and public review. Approval of formal TIP Amendment 2204 is requested, and I can answer any questions if there are any at this time.
Great. Thanks, Russell. Let's go ahead and entertain a motion in a second, and then we'll take questions. Do I have a motion to approve this? TIP Amendment 2204.
So move, Snyder.
Thanks, Chris. Can I have a second?
Rockingham, second.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, do we have any questions for Russell? No questions for Russell. All right, well, Lindsay, let's go ahead and take a roll call.
Okay, Karen Raguglia for IDOT.
Aye.
Kevin Carrier.
Aye.
Lynette Ciavarella.
Aye.
Doug Ferguson.
Aye.
Jessica Hector Sue,
Aye.
John Paul DePlo,
Aye.
and Doug voting for Tom. Doug
Aye.
DeLeo. Thank you. Jackie Forbes,
Aye.
Christina Kopkowski,
Aye.
Eric Llewellyn,
Aye.
Chris Hebert,
Aye.
Tara Orban, Jessica Ortega.
Aye.
Thank you. And Tom Rickert,
Aye.
Mayor Rockingham,
Aye.
Joe Schofer,
Aye.
Big Nick Krishnamurthy,
Aye.
Chris Snyder,
Aye.
and Audrey Wennick,
Aye.
and Amy Lee.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. The motion carries. Let's go ahead and move on to 502, the Regional ITS Architecture version 4.0. For this, we'll have Aaron Brown and Daniel Camo. Go ahead, Aaron and Daniel.
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, everyone. So I'm Daniel Como. I'm a transportation policy analyst here at CMAP, along with my colleague Aaron Brown, who's a senior analyst in the Research Analysis and Programming division. We have taken over the sort of oversight and stewarding of the regional ITS architecture from Claire Bozick, who retired from the agency last year, and Tom Murtha, who has also been involved in this work historically, continues to support this effort. So we're here today to ask for your recommendation to MPO to adopt an updated version of the Northeastern Illinois Regional Intelligent Transportation Systems architecture. If you're not familiar, this is a roadmap for transportation systems integration in Northeastern Illinois, in the 7 counties and a portion of Grundy County over the next 15 years. The architecture historically and this current version have been developed through a cooperative effort by the region's transportation agencies, and it covers all modes and all roads in the region. And it represents a shared vision of how each of those agency systems can work together to share information and resources to provide a safer, more efficient, and more effective transportation system. And so this architecture can be used by operating agencies, by planning agencies, by other organizations and individuals throughout the region. In general, it provides an overarching framework spanning individual organizations and projects and allows the region's transportation providers to view each of those projects as an element of the overall transportation system. So we're here today because the last major revision to the architecture was completed in the mid-2010s, and at that time it was adopted formally by the MPO. Over time, that version of the architecture became outdated, and especially with the adoption of ONTO 2050, there were a number of policies, action areas, and projects that were active in the region or planned in the region, but were not reflected in the architecture, which at that time was version 3. And so in 2019, CMAP and a consultant team started a process of updating the architecture to a comprehensive review of what was inside of it and adding new projects and ideas as needed. Staff and that consulting team engaged with the many regional stakeholders, many of whom are represented on this call today, involved in these regional ITS issues. And so that included representatives from IDOT, from the tollway, county and municipal officials, federal highways, the transit service providers, and more. And so as part of that process, staff and the consultants gathered revisions to existing projects, identified new ones, and combined all of those changes into the comprehensive update to version 4, which is what we're presenting today. That process was overseen by a group formerly known as the Advanced Technology Task Force, which is a working group of transportation operators in the region. So that group, the ATTF, received regular updates about this work over the course of 2019 and 2020, and received and concurred with the final draft of version 4 in 2021. And so we're now bringing it to the MPO for formal adoption as a significant update to the architecture, and are asking for you as a transportation committee to recommend to MPO that they adopt these changes. The memos that we provided in the packet include a list of the changes that were made. In general, this is a comprehensive refresh, and so there were a number of additions to projects, to stakeholders, to data inventories. We're happy to answer any questions about specifics if you have them. In general, our approach with this architecture moving forward is that we will come back to TC and to MPO for significant updates when there are changes on this scale. But in the interim, these will be managed, minor changes, project level changes will be managed by a group called the Transportation Technology and Operations Coalition, which is a group that we are in the process of reconvening, merging two former working groups, the Advanced Technology Task Force and the Regional Transportation Operations Coalition. And so in the interim, as new ITS initiatives are developed in the region, that group and staff will work to maintain the architecture and keep it current with new developments. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and we would ask for your recommendation that MPO approve this update to the architecture. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for that overview. I remember when the initial legislation was passed that required these, and actually began my career working on ITS architectures across the country. So it's interesting to see this update. Do you know if there is funding in the new infrastructure bill to help push forward ITS projects specifically?
I'm going to pop in for Daniel here. I don't believe I recall anything that was specifically focused on ITS. It's eligible in lots of other places, but recognizing competing priorities, I feel like it always gets pushed down. But I do think it's one of the things that is critical as we think about sort of system operability that CMAP as the regional agency should be continuing to wave the flag for. So we'll double check on that.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Yeah, I agree. I didn't see anything specific to ITS, but it would be good for us to think about how to advance some of these plans now that they've been in some of the projects are moving forward, but now that they've been in the architecture for a good 20 years, it would be good to try and nudge some of them forward. Anyway, with that, do we have a motion and a second, and then we can ask more questions about the item itself?
Tom Rickard motions to recommend approval to the MPO.
Thanks, Tom.
Orban seconds.
Thanks, Tara. Any other questions for Daniel before we take a vote?
I have a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation, Daniel. I think there's a lot of value in this document, and I just want to recognize, some of the things that are in there, just like even the effort it takes to have a comprehensive list of all ITS agreements in the region. So, which is wonderful, and we learned, my team learned, quite a few new things along the way while looking at this document, such as the fact that IDOT, Illinois State Police, and Cook County Sheriff are working on a joint computer-aided dispatch system. So thank you for preparing it. I think that this is of great value and will support and complement the ongoing IDOT Regional Arterial Traffic Management Center project. We did just have the last meeting this week for that, and that will be moving forward. So I see these initiatives as complementary and supportive to each other. So thank you for this update.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. Well said. Any other comments or questions?
Could I make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Not a question for Daniel, but I would add on the previous conversation about funding, I would make a plug. The CMAQ program loves to fund ITS projects, improving the operations to help reduce congestion and therefore improve air quality. So just making that plug, something to keep in mind.
Yeah, good point. Yes, we've been plugging away at transit signal priority using CMAQ funds. So that is a good reminder that that's a good source of funding. Any other comments or questions?
Hi, this is Amy over at Tollway. Wanted to ask real quick, how is this effort, the architecture being sort of worked into IDOT's statewide TISMO plan that's being circulated right now for review.
So I know that we have staff representation on that. Doug, do you participate in that? Or is that Todd?
I do not.
Okay, so we have CMAP staff that are involved in that work. I am not involved in that directly, but certainly representatives from that participate in the Transportation Technology and Operations Coalition group. So there's some coordination that happens there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Amy.
I think too, Amy, one of the things of that study, they had a couple ongoing studies that I recall, and one was looking at like coordination of like service facilities for ITS architecture, sort of like where the mothership is and if there are shared opportunities for staffing and resources too. So I think it also was a much broader plan than some of the architecture for the region.
Okay, thanks. I mean, just as a heads up, you know, the tollway does active traffic management up on I-90 and our smart road corridor. We're going to be expanding that along Central Tri-State 294. It'll be pretty critical for us over the Bensonville Yard Bridge where capacity is limited. So we will be doing daily active traffic management there. And I know that INDOT and IDOT are in partnership talking about bus on shoulder riding and actively managing a shoulder down there on I-80. So, yeah, at some point these things start to kind of converge at these boundaries of our jurisdiction. So it's nice to see something that tries to pull us together in an organized way.
Yeah, really good point, Amy. Thanks for sharing that. Any other comments or questions? No? All right. Well, Lindsay, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Okay, Karen Raguglia.
Aye.
Kevin Carrier.
Aye.
Lynette Ciavarella.
Aye.
Doug Ferguson.
Aye.
Jessica Hector Sue.
Aye.
John Paul Deepla.
Aye.
Doug D'Elia.
Aye.
Jackie Forbes.
Aye.
Christina Kapowski.
Aye.
Eric Llewellyn.
Aye.
Chris Hebert.
Aye.
Tara Orban.
Aye.
Jessica Ortega.
Aye.
And Tom Rickert.
Aye.
Mayor Rockingham.
Aye.
Joe Schofer.
Aye.
Big Krishnamurthy.
Aye.
Chris Snyder.
Aye.
And Audrey Wennick.
Aye.
And Amy Lee.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay. The motion carries. Let's move on to our information items for today. First up, we have an On-to 2050 update. I think we have a couple of folks presenting, Elizabeth, Martin, and Jane. So take it away.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Jessica. I'm Elizabeth Scott. I'm a principal in the Plan Implementation and Legislative Affairs Division at CMAP, and I'm going to kick off our conversation today about the On-to 2050 update. You all have been hearing some information over the last year about this work, and we want to just make sure that here in the new year, you're really anchored in where we are in this process. So I'm going to be talking with you a little bit about the overall structure of the work and the steps that are going to take us from now to adoption of the plan update, which is planned for October of this year. And then Martin and Jane are going to give you some updates on the constituent projects. So let's get into it. Next slide, please. So as I'm sure most of you are aware, On-to 2050 is the region's adopted comprehensive plan, regional comprehensive plan. It also serves as our region's long-range transportation plan for MPO purposes. Next slide. I hope you all will get some delight out of this picture. In October of 2018, many of us here on the call today were gathered in a tent in Millennium Park, adopting ON2 2050 after 3 years of intensive plan making that included engagement of over 100,000 stakeholders. And that plan and that planning effort that sets the long-term direction for the region, we still believe in and support and think it has value in leading us forward. But we do need to periodically update some of the more technical aspects of the plan. So our work here, as a reminder, is to leave intact the principles, the policies, and the vision of ON2 2050, but to take a look at data, the way data has changed, the way the context has changed, and update some of the technical pieces that are required of us by the federal government. So next slide, please. And I think I preempted myself, so even next slide. And so in terms of what we've been up to, it's a kind of a broad team across divisions at CMAP. There are 10 sort of sub-projects or constituent activities that staff have been engaged in throughout the 2050 plan update process. You have previously received presentations on many of these elements. But today, after I go over the schedule with you, you'll be hearing from Martin on the federal targets and where he's going with the system performance report, and then from Jane Grover about the public engagement activities that we have planned for the spring. So next slide. And I just really wanted to spend some time with you all today talking about the schedule. It's difficult now 2 years in of not really being together in person, so I just want to be as clear as possible about what the dates are for the next year and what is going to be happening when. So if any of you want more information at any time, you want to be engaged with more depth about any element of it, that you kind of know when the different pieces of work are coming and when we're going to be looking to you for various approvals. So I've divided this up kind of into the first 3 quarters of the calendar year, and then October, which is really what we're shooting for adoption for the plan update. So in the previous year, our teams have been working with many of you and internally to complete most of the projects that were listed in the previous slide. We are in the process right now of concluding staff assessment of the regionally significant projects. So that includes relooking at everything that was previously constrained, but is not currently under construction, because we would never remove support for something that's already a shovel in the ground, clearly. And then getting from the implementers the new projects for consideration. So we've done a lot of quantitative analysis, and we'll be ready soon, like next week, for the packet to go out to board and MPO for that list to be put forward. The timing was really unfortunate that we couldn't bring you all the list today. We're almost complete with it, but Doug and Lindsay will follow up with you as soon as it's released to the MPO. This is what we think the draft list is. And then we have on the schedule a formal conversation for April for the group. The purpose of putting the list out there in March is it's pre-public comment to try and give everyone plenty of time to see what the information is, to discuss it, for us to make any changes that we need to make before asking for this group and the board and the MPO to consider a sort of final draft list that will go out for public comment in June. And if you have any questions or concerns, Doug and Terry would be more than happy to answer those questions, I'm sure, for you. But moving forward in the next quarter, we're going to be doing some engagement activities that Jane is going to talk to you about. We're going to be completing the plan narrative, which will contextualize all the technical appendices that'll come forward. That'll be what you'll actually be voting on. We'll be starting to share those drafts with you, and then coming to this committee at the end of April will be the draft package of everything to be going out for public comment. And then in June, that's when we're going to be voting to release the draft plan for public comment. Public comment will be open from June to August. There'll be a public hearing around the end of the public comment period. We'll incorporate, what we hear from folks during that process. We'll come back to you all and give a summary and a summary of what we heard and how we responded to the formal comments that we heard through that process. Then the team will go away and do a little bit more work and be in position to put forward the plan update on the October 12th meetings of the joint meeting of the board and the MPO. And assuming that they approve the plan update at that time, subsequent to that, we will do some website updates to just make sure that all the most current information is out there for people who are looking for ON2 2050 information, and we will print copies and have them available at our office, and also send them out to all of you and our mayors and other stakeholders. So that's kind of the plan to get us from here to the end of the year in terms of what CMAP needs to do for the update. And I would be happy to do my best, and I'm sure Aaron will jump in and help me to answer any questions you have about the schedule or the timing or the milestones.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Any questions for Elizabeth about the milestones or the processes that are going on right now? Thanks for offering to send out the RSP list to this group when it goes out to the MPO. I think that's very helpful. So we appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions? Doesn't look like you have any questions, Elizabeth.
Well, that's great. If you are thinking about any of these dates after the meeting and questions occur to you, please reach out to us. We want to be, we want to be engaged at every step of the way. So, or be engaging with you. Thanks, Jessica. So let's turn it to Martin for the next piece of the presentation.
Hello, everyone. If you want to go to the next slide, and one more. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our federal performance measures. These are the measures that we're required to set based on MAP 21 and updates since then to federal bills. MPOs set them, states set them, and transit agencies set them for the transit targets. There's 5 areas. Last time we did a plan, when we did ON2 2050, only the first 4, although I've got them in the wrong, different order here. So transit safety was just adopted last year, so there was only 4 areas, but now there'll be 5 with the update. We try to align these with the plan cycle as much as we can. Some of them have shorter timelines, so we can't do that. I just want to highlight quickly before we dive into each one of these areas that there are sort of our federal performance measures that we're required to set, and then our plan indicators. There are some overlap between them. The plan indicators really look out to 2050, where these have 1 to 4 year timelines, like I mentioned. And the other thing is our planned indicators cover a large variety of areas: governance, prosperity, the environment, where these are really focused on transportation. If you want to jump to the next one, next slide. So many of these indicators or federal target areas have come to Transportation Committee and MPO over the last 4 years. One you've seen a lot of is highway safety. On each of these slides, I've got sort of a color coding of approximately green for good, yellow for okay, and red for not on track to hit our targets. There are 5 highway safety measures, so you've heard about these a lot as they come once each year. We have been following IDOT's lead and supporting IDOT's targets for highway safety. Partially as a result of the feedback from this committee, CMAP has done quite a bit over the last 4 years to increase our focus and efforts around safety. So our targets that we propose this summer, and in the fall will be those that were adopted in January by the MPO due to the cycle for this one. Next slide. Next is highway condition. You'll hear a lot of similarities between highway condition and transit condition when I get to that slide. Highway condition tracks bridges and pavement. In general, the condition is worse than it was in 2016 when we adopted the 2050 plan. We did revise the pavement measure last year, and so that came to TC and MPO. We're using a little bit more detailed data for that. That includes cracking on pavement to align with federal rules. Both the highway and the transit condition have financial models that link the targets we set for these to our constrained financial plan. One last thing I want to say about this one. So we have seen that condition was getting worse when we set our last targets. And that does seem to be the trend still. However, we're optimistic as there has the TAM plan that the asset management plan that the state has written starts to be implemented. Also, the plan, when it was adopted last time, recommended significant new funding. And we have seen both state and federal bills pass that increase funding for these areas. So we're not sure if that's going to actually start to impact the measures in the timeline of this plan, but we're optimistic. And so our targets remain as they were for the last plan of slow and steady improvement for both bridges and pavement. Next slide. System performance is kind of a different than many of the other measures. This one looks at congestion and air quality and emissions. So this area has been impacted by the pandemic more than any others. I just want to highlight that with two of these charts. Sorry, they're pretty small for you. The first one looks at non-SOV mode share, non-single occupant vehicle mode share. And we have targets that are roughly based on the idea of doubling transit ridership by 2050. We've actually been meeting that trend. However, not because we're doubling transit ridership, but because working from home has been increasing so much. Our last data point on that is 2019. So even before the pandemic, working from home was really driving an increase in non-SOV commuting. We're curious to see what the data looks like once we start to get 2020 and 2021 data on this. The next chart I have is, I should have spelled out the acronym. It's LOTTR, level of travel time reliability. So on this chart, up means more reliable travel times. We just in the last week got a 2021 data point for this. But what we saw with the pandemic is much less traffic on the much fewer vehicles on the road meant more reliable travel times. In the last plan, our goal for this area was to sort of hold reliability constant. Our modeling and things indicated that there was potential to get worse, for travel times to get less reliable as the population increased. But we hope to counteract that with things like ITS and system improvements. So our goal was to hold reliability stable to where it was. With the pandemic, we don't know what the future is going to, what's going to happen if trends are going to return to normal. You see with that data point that was just added, they're starting to return to normal. And so our proposal is to keep that hold steady on reliability for this one. Two of these measures have to be applied. Two of these measures apply to the urbanized area as defined by the census. We will get those definitions sometime next month of what those urbanized areas are, but they cross into Indiana and Wisconsin at the moment. So we'll be working with our partners in our neighboring states on those measures. Next slide. All right, transit safety. Transit safety is similar to highway safety, looking at fatalities, serious injuries, events. And then the last one is distance between mechanical failure. So there are 7 measures, and we set them for 4 different modes. You'll note that METRA is not listed here. METRA's safety is regulated by the FRA, so they're not included in this. Transit safety was the last rule finalized, so we just adopted targets last year. We will be following a similar methodology for setting those targets this time, focusing sort of on Vision Zero for the fatalities and following the transit agency's lead for the other measures. Yeah, next slide. All right, our last one. And I said you're going to hear a lot of things that I said for the highway condition on this one. In general, our condition on the transit system is worse than it was in 2016. One big change in this area, and there's been a lot, is we have much better data. So the transit agencies were really in the middle of writing their asset management plans when ON2 2050 was adopted. And they've done a lot of work and continue to do engineering assessments, which are on a 3 or 4 year cycle, to get better data on their asset conditions. The FTA has done a lot of work on the National Transit Database that we use to calculate these measures to include more information and make that available to us. And the RTA has been doing a lot of work on capital planning for the transit agencies. So this is one of the only measures that hasn't come back to this committee in the last 4 years, but a lot of background work just to get our data and information better has happened in that time. So excited to share some of that information with you. And as I mentioned, this along with highway is one that is constrained in the financial plan. Next slide. Next slide. So all of this information will go into a system performance report. If you looked at our system report from the last plan, the update will look very familiar. We'll introduce each performance area, talk about the work that CMAP is doing in that area, and how we incorporate these measures into our programming process. We directly use some of these measures in our SDP and CMAC allocation, project scoring. There will be detail around each of the targets that sort of describes the measure and gives you some a chart of the history of and trend on that measure. And then any methodological changes since our last plan. One new thing that we're going to add in, if any of you are ETIP users, you know that there is a checkbox in ETIP where you have to indicate what projects support the federal measures and what measures they're supporting. We hope to include some of that data in the report to illustrate how our funding is going and contributing towards these measures. Elizabeth did a great job covering the schedule. We're doing outreach with our committees and with individual partners as needed. This summer, early in the second quarter of the year, we will release this for public comment, and then this will be adopted as an appendix to the plan in October. Next slide. Are there any questions on federal performance measures before I hand it over to Jane?
Thanks, Martin. I know this is a lot of work for you, so I appreciate all this information. Just one question for me first, and then I'll open it to others. Can you talk a little bit about how you're going to take into account the effects of COVID when you look at targets for the next few years? You kind of mentioned it throughout the presentation, which measures were and weren't affected by COVID, but can you talk a little bit more about that for us?
Yeah, so our general approach to most targets is to continue the same target setting methodology that we did with the original plan. So at this moment, most of the measures are, we're just extending the trend line out from the last target. For things like highway condition, transit condition, and things like that that are less impacted by COVID, that's not a big deal. Some of the safety measures, we are having to think about sort of their denominator is VMT and things like that. We have to think about, you know, is that changing? Is the VMT changing? Is service changing? And we're factoring that in to our sort of 4-year target where that might be and what that might mean.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, keep us updated on that. I think that will be something that we'll need to continue to talk through as you go through this process. Any questions for Martin?
I had a question. Martin, I'm just, if you said it, I apologize, I missed it. On the highway condition, from 2018 to 2019, noticeable improvements in the good category. But what's worse is equally, apologize, my warranty is up. But equally increases in poor. So did I hear you say that something happened in 18-19 in terms of the methodology tool? Because if we were looking at 18, we're solid on the targets. 19, I don't know what happened.
We did update our methodology, but both of those numbers use the federal methodology. I know we dug into this, and I can't remember what we found. I'm sorry, I'll have to follow up with you, but we also noticed that significant change from year to year. And I want to say that there was one highway that everything turned red on when we dug into it. But I don't want to say the wrong highway, so I don't want to call someone out. But I believe there was one highway that had a big shift between those 2 years. And
Okay.
it might have been under construction or something like that. I'll follow up with you.
Yeah,
with a better answer.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for that. Anyone else have questions for Martin?
I do. I am a member, this is Christina Kapkowski. I am actually a member of what was formerly RTOC, and in the past, the highway safety measures were brought to RTOC first. Is that going to continue with whatever the new committee is that takes the place of that? As I know that was an issue with the members of RTOC in the past.
Yeah, I think we're still figuring out our new committee structure a little bit. So I can't give you a firm answer on that. I think it will definitely continue to come to Transportation Committee. And I think we're looking to engage more committees on safety. So whatever the evolution of RTOC turns into, we'll continue to engage on safety. So.
Christina, can I ask for a little bit more detail on that? Because I guess I didn't realize this. You know, from the perspective of the RTOC and the Advanced Technology Task Force, you know, could you talk a little bit about some of the discussions that they would have related to system condition? You know, I think
well,
the team understands.
I think the big thing for the members of RTOC is it's the actual operators of the system that are in the room, and they have a better in-depth understanding of what's going on as far as what their systems are capable of doing currently as far as highway safety measures, and are the safety measures that are being proposed realistic for our networks to actually be able to handle as far as the operating standpoint. Now, you have to forgive me, I am not an operator. I sit on the committee for Will County, and I sit there and I have a foggiest idea of half of what you're talking about. But I know that I am, I believe, the only member that sits on both of those committees because of Will County being such, we don't actually have a traffic engineer at the moment. We're looking for one. But so I've been attending those meetings for years, and I know that every time the safety measures come up, there have been a number of times, there's been at least once where discussion was that it wasn't going to come to RTOC first, and the operators have concerns that that without their voice being heard as far as the safety measures, that there may be unrealistic safety measures put into place that the operators then of the systems cannot actually reach or maintain.
Thanks. I think that's really helpful. I think knowing sort of the meaning and intent of the conversation too, and the safety ones are hard. We had lots of conversations about them too, because I think the approach we've taken is to follow IDOT's safety targets as opposed to create our own. And theirs is really a policy focused target where, and even when I was at IDOT, we had lots of discussions like who wants to set a higher death and fatality rate. And so to continue to drive that down is the policy decision that we all focus on that downward trend as opposed to setting what might be more realistic, but also is just very tragic sounding. So, but we'll come back. I'll have the team think about like how we can have an important conversation about that with the group if that's an issue area that they are passionate about. Thank you.
And Aaron, just to build on what Christina said, I think that, RTOC specifically, my team that attends is they handle the roadway lighting, the traffic signals, ITS, pavement marking, raise reflective pavement markers. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, so in the area of safety, in terms of what we can do for implementation, they are our subject matter experts in terms of like feasibility of implementation. So one example that got kicked around years ago was like, what about raised reflective pavement markers? How many do you have? We have no idea, so it's just like, let's start with like where we're at. So, because some of the analysis and the data needed, we simply don't have and would be incredibly cumbersome for the team to implement. And I think it's with that in mind, I hear Christina's concern from that in terms of, if you need a team or a sounding board on traffic related implementation, I think that committee and those people on it are the ideal subject matter experts in that arena. And whatever form that takes moving forward, I do offer that to you.
Thank you so much for that too. And I'll make sure that we flag this for Vicki as well as we work on that speed management paper, because I think the tactical responses and activities are going to be just as important as sort of the big picture data stuff that we've been looking at too. So thank you for allowing me to pipe in and ask a few more clarifying questions.
And if I may, on the RTOC side of things, Christina and Tara, that's certainly something that was on our minds for what we would discuss in that group. We have the first sort of reconstituted meeting scheduled for next month, and part of our agenda was going to be talking about what the group is most interested in discussing. But in discussions with Abraham at CDOT, who's now chairing the group, that was one area that we had identified as a continued area for discussion.
We look forward to it. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks for that, Danielle and Aaron, and Tara and Christina as well. Any other questions for Martin?
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
I think Jane is up next. Yes.
Yep. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Martin. Jane Grover, I direct the public engagement for CMAP. Our public engagement, as you might recall, for the 2050 plan itself was rather extensive. It was phased in over 3 years. It included a couple hundred workshops, speakers forums, mobile kiosks, lots of events. The public engagement to update the plan will be just as purposeful, but more targeted, reflecting more the technical nature of the plan update and the limited scope. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Doug, for advancing slides, by the way. So we'll seek input on this plan update from the agency's committees and working group members, including you, as well as people and organizations who serve as our partners in this undertaking, such as the service boards, county transportation directors, county planning directors, advocacy organizations, and of course, the general public. Next slide, please, Doug, thanks. So you've heard from Elizabeth Scott at the beginning about the milestones in our schedule for the plan update itself. This is how the public engagement fits in. There will be, again, 3 phases, but they won't stretch out over 3 years, obviously. It'll stretch out between this month and the October approval of the plan update. The first phase will take us through May, and between now and then we'll convene stakeholders in briefings, roundtable discussions, and we'll offer an informational webinar to the general public. We'll share information about the plan update and its process along the way with our larger regional constituency through our newsletter, website, and social media. The input will be incorporated, as you've heard, in a draft plan update, which we'll submit for public comment starting in June, and it will culminate in the statutorily required public hearing, and we're aiming for August for the public hearing. We'll use a dedicated email account or onto2050@cmap.illinois.org.gov to collect then the public comment, and it will all be compiled into an appendix for the ultimate plan update. So I can say that, as you've seen from the presentation, please expect the plan update to appear on your agenda as a standing item on your agenda for pretty much the remainder of the year. So we will bring you up to date on and seek your input on the RSPs, on the draft plan itself, to review the public comment that we've received before the plan is submitted to the board and MPO for approval. Any questions? I think it's my part that wraps up this presentation and this agenda item in today's meeting. Happy to take any questions. And again, as Elizabeth said at the beginning, if you have any suggestions about the process for the plan update or groups that you might want us to be sure to include in our engagement for the plan update, please let us know.
Thanks, Jane. And that's a great idea to have this as a standing item on our agenda for the rest of the year or throughout the rest of your process on this so that you can keep us up to date. Any questions for Jane? Once, going twice. All right, no questions for you, Jane. Thank you so much for that update. Thank you to all of you for that. That was very helpful and informative. We look forward to seeing the work that comes out of this. So let's go ahead and move on to item 6.02, CMAP strategic direction and the transportation committee. And for this, we will have Erin.
Thanks. Did I unmute myself? Yes, I did. Okay. All right. Well, last year we embarked on an internal exercise to really look at our work, our resources, and think about how we can guide and focus our work on the implementation of the 2050 plan goals here. So if I could have the next slide. We built a vision and really thought about our work in the framework of our core values here. Next slide. We are always focused on how can we help develop, support, engage our stakeholders in creating an inclusive and thriving region. It's really our North Star. It's just a little bit out of reach, but it's something that we know that we need to do if we're going to make changes to our region. It's really aspirational here. And our mission on the next slide is to serve the people of the region by driving innovation, by fostering shared action, and advancing towards a common vision. So just as that vision statement serves as our North Star for guiding our decisions, actions, plans, the mission statement helps us refine our big ideas by reminding us that we have a specific value proposition to offer our agencies that we convene here on a regular basis here, and what it is that we bring to the table. So next slide. Through our thinking about a strategic direction, what we're best suited to help accomplish and move forward related to the 2050 plan, we've really adopted this theory of change that will help to explain the causal linkages between the actions, which are the projects and the activities that we do, and the expected long-term and short-term outcomes, as well as the assumptions. So we really want to sort of take a look at our body of work and make sure the work that we're doing is advancing the 2050 plan goals and objectives meaningfully. And how do we measure that? Not just the plan, the plan measures and indicators, but really our body of work and how is that helping support the region here. So contributing to those our 3 core goals, transportation, regional economic competitiveness, and climate. These goals really have the highest level long-term outcomes that CMAP and our partners will achieve and the best places for us to influence with our work. So I think next slide, I didn't incorporate. Great. So just a broad framework here of our vision, our mission, those goals that are focused on transportation, regional economy, and climate. With this 5-year strategic plan, again, we will have a series of objectives. A lot of the work will be the same, but I think what we're trying to do is dig in and make that work deeper and really find a way to advance a few projects more successfully and really find ways, again, to bring our partners into that process as opposed to trying to tackle all of the things at once. So if I could have the next slide. For the transportation, I'm going to just walk through the high-level goals and objectives that we have here. I'm going to share a little bit about the committees, the Climate Committee, the Regional Economy Committee, and then I'll end on Transportation Committee and talk with you a little bit, as I alluded to with Audrey's question, how do we want to work with you moving forward and what's going to be meaningful. So for the transportation area, our goal is really a transportation system that works better for everyone. Exact language from our 2050 plan here. And in terms of objectives on the next slide, we want to make sure that we are making strategic decisions and investments in our region and that we're systematizing those. I think when I think of Jessica's question about the ITS and the regional ITS infrastructure, again, things that will make our system more successful, but we do need to sort of put a focused attention on those areas. A transportation system that's efficiently maintained and modernized and that travel safety is improved. So those are sort of core guiding objectives that we'll be focused on. Next slide. So you all know who's on the Transportation Committee right now, so we can sort of keep going. So as I noted earlier, this new structure, 2 new committees from our board here, but it, again, it really ties to our strategic plan and the 2050 plan. So in terms of the regional economic competitiveness element of our 2050 plan, again, the big goal is making sure that we have a robust and inclusive regional economy. Our economy here is really dictated by transportation. It is our competitive advantage. It is the reason why we aren't focused on one single sectoral industry, but we have many, and many of them have transportation, freight, and logistics needs across our region. So next slide. The objectives here are really to make sure that we're thinking about inclusive growth, access to those jobs through our transportation network, and access to those economic opportunities, and how we're making sure that we're thinking about how our system, our goods, and our people can get to the places that they need to go. Next slide. So the regional economy membership here, we are in the process of inviting people to be a part of the regional economy committee here, but we've got folks from municipal, policy, housing, private sector, real estate, a whole sort of cohort of people that we think will help us drive this conversation. But I think one of the other things that we've been thinking about for this next year is where are those moments in time in the projects that perhaps we need to have a joint meeting between Transportation Committee and our Regional Economy Committee. We have the county economic development organizations on here, councils of governments as well, and some ex officio members. So you'll see some people that you've seen before. We're also trying to bring in some new voices here as well to our committee structure. Next slide. So in terms of the climate arena, the goal from 2050 is that we have a region that takes action to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change, but that also we're thinking about preserving our high quality water resources as well. So next slide is the objectives, right? Our objectives here, looking at greenhouse gases from the transportation system, making sure that we're identifying strategies, that we're putting our money towards projects that will reduce those, that our network is more resilient against flooding and extreme weather. I know many of you have been engaged with the team on the regional transportation vulnerability assessment that we're kicking off right now. And that we're also thinking about protecting our water resources and sustainably managing them through the partnerships that we have with IDNR and IEPA as well. So next slide. Again, this climate committee membership has county, city, policy, advocacy. We're also making sure that we're thinking about our municipal cohorts. So the system that we use to identify the resources communities have, but that we're making sure we're hearing from the broad array of communities, those that have resources and those that don't, so that we're having sort of that holistic conversation about what it is that we need to be doing and some things that we might not be thinking about related to climate and the environment and our transportation system overall. So we've got some US EPAs on here and some climate, some academics as well, and water quality subject matter experts and public health folks. So again, some people you've seen before, some new voices to the table. Again, we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's, inviting people to be a part of these. And then we do anticipate that these two new reconstituted committees will meet in March. So then, okay, next slide. This one is even hard for me to see here, but essentially we've got our committee structure. We will have a series of public bodies here. So you've got the CMAP board and the MPO policy committee at the top, but that we will have public meetings of our coordinating committee, regional economy committee, climate committee, transportation committee, citizens advisory committee, and the council of mayors. Those are our big public bodies, but that we still have SDP, CMAC and TAP, the tier 2 consultation, UWP, and wastewater committees. So committees that sort of heavily tied to this body specifically. And so those are the public bodies at the top in that orange and blue. And then below that, the squares and rectangles, I suppose is how this was put together, are really the working groups that we continue to have, that we want to continue to convene on different issue areas and opportunities that are relevant to the work that we have going on through the day. So you'll see a bunch of stuff going on there, but that essentially we will continue to do the EV working group as a resource group, but not a public body. The freight advisory group is really a resource group for us, that we're bringing people to the table. But our goal also is that we need to have public input at those committee levels, that we can also have public meetings that are formal, that have presentations and whatnot. So again, if you have voices or people from your parts of the region or your organizations that would like to be engaged in the working groups, again, those tables can expand and contract as the work and the bodies of work need to. Next slide. Okay. So here's where I want to spend the most of our time, and I know there's something after me too, so I want to be mindful of that as well. But that we want to think about what we need to do in partnership with the Transportation Committee over this next year here. I think, again, we recognize that there's opportunities. One thing that we had done, the safety working group that we have ongoing right now really fell out of this committee. And it was a need that was articulated, that was well-defined, that we've been working together on to address those safety performance measures. But again, I think what we've all been talking about is what we need to do for IIJA and how do we really make sure that we're well coordinated as a region. So the next slide, I think, just asks a question here. And this is where we wanted to start hearing from you specifically about what you think we need in terms of working groups from the transportation side. One of the things, there are probably a million possibilities. So right now I think the floor is open. Let's throw some spaghetti on the wall. I want to gather and hear and think you're thinking about what the needs might be. But I'll just sort of start off by saying, a couple things that we've been ideating around is the PROTECT funds, the resiliency funds, and that are new core funds for the federal transportation bill, and the carbon reduction funds have significant opportunities to make our region's dollars go farther. I think that those are two places where we might want to consider setting up some working groups and figure out who we need to have, some cities, some counties, at the table to talk about those things. The Complete Streets Funds is another thing. It's really focused on active transportation and safety. It could be a real great launching point for the work that we've been doing from the safety working group to have some execution of resources that we would develop a program collaboratively on here across the region. I think that's another place where we might want to have a working group to help us think through how we strategize utilizing those resources. Again, we could think about resiliency. As Chris mentioned earlier, right, the EV stuff is coming and it's coming fast and we need to get organized around that. And projects of regional significance could be another place that we want to focus. So with those small little seeds, I think I would love to hear from you all as to what's been keeping you up at night in terms of how we could be working together as a region better, where you have questions that you think CMAP would be well positioned to help support you as we think about executing some of these programs.
Thanks, Aaron. I think I'll lead off so that others can form their thoughts. I think that resiliency is a great area for you to take some leadership in. I think you're already doing that, and I think that that's really helpful. And when we've looked at resiliency of the transit system, obviously there are implications for climate change for rail infrastructure and transit infrastructure specifically, but there also are a lot of implications for the roads that the buses operate on. And that's been an impedance for us moving forward with resiliency improvements when we looked at it in the past, just that it's such a big issue. Flooding specifically really impedes bus movement, and we're expecting more of that in the future, unfortunately. So I think it's really helpful for you to be able to convene people across modes to talk about how to improve resiliency of the system, and definitely getting beyond just the impacts of climate change to electric vehicle charging infrastructure and so forth. CMAP's leadership is really helpful there. So I think that is a great idea. And the other ones you listed as well, I think would be really helpful. So thoughts from others on Aaron's question here?
This is Chris from DuPage. I know many of the counties have had recent opportunity to sit down with Yusuf and get to know him. And I know that we've talked about the grant that CMAP has received on the accelerator program. And I think where, a lot of that topic of discussion centered around the potentials for bridges. And so you've got the new bridge program, if I recall, from ILJA, the bridge investment program. So there might be some parity between that accelerator program and what comes out of it, and looking at, making sure our bridges, which admittedly was the only trend on the highway side that was actually trending in the right direction. So it's nice to see that and those investments being made. But there might be some opportunity to take that other grant that we're working on, learn from it, develop something in terms of a bundling program or something, and then leverage some of these bridge investment funds at a larger national kind of grant program.
Thanks, Chris.
And again, I'll say the EV stuff is big. I mean, we're looking at it, DuPage County, and don't know if we have or when we're going to involve our, electric provider, power providers in those discussions. But I know it's something that we're hearing from our board members, the need to every purchase, the vehicles we're buying today, the next replacement 10 years from now won't be diesel or won't be gas. It will be electric. So we need to start planning for that.
And can I ask just a follow-up question on the power provider side? I know that we've traditionally had like government affairs folks from ComEd participate in some of our regional economic development work. I mean, to what extent is there a need to have some more cross-sectoral conversations with them? Are you hearing from them? Are they part of your conversations at the counties?
So I know we have conversations with them, and I know when it comes to, we looked at our campus, we would draw more power to power our fleets overnight than we use here on the campus during the day. And so can the grid handle that? And so I think the people to answer those questions are going to be our the ComEds of the world and others, to be able to say what they need to do in order to support this transition. We can all talk about buying the next Tesla or whatever we use for our electric vehicle, but we still need the power grid to support that.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Tom, were you going to weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about bicycle pedestrian. You had mentioned the Complete Streets funding that's become available. I'm not really sure how that fits in with where we've been with bicycle pedestrian. We've seen significant changes over the last 20 years with the multiple planning efforts, as well as the data collection and addressing safety concerns around the region. And I just want to make sure that continues to be an effort that is looked at. I know that you had mentioned the safety aspect and the complete street aspect. But I'm just asking, I know that it's no longer a working group, quote unquote, but in previous discussions, there were talk about it being more of a less formal working group that fed into the process. I'm just kind of wondering what some of the thoughts are, some of the discussions that might be occurring internally with CMAP staff.
I think on the bike ped end, the opportunity with this sort of requirement to look at complete streets is pretty important, and thinking about having that be a working group and making sure that the bicycle and pedestrian group is better tied to this committee and the work here that would go on. So that's sort of what we've been talking about. It's what the differentiation is, that it's no longer a public body, right? Is that it can be flexible and that the scope can change and that we can bring in new partners without having to go through that formal process of approval and bylaws, but that it can be nimble and responsive to the needs that we're focused on. So I think that's really what we're focused on. And I think with these working groups or these sort of thought leadership groups that we need to have here is what we're trying to do, is just be responsive to the day, put something that's only going to be up and running. Some of these we'll do in perpetuity, but some of these we really just need to have a 6-month session where we meet every other week and we're just putting things down on paper, because that's what we need to be responsive to the programs and activities that are coming.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, it's Jessica Ortega, Bike Ped Committee. Yeah, thanks, Tom, for bringing that up. I think, yeah, complete streets is going to be really critical, and I think further involvement by members of the Bike Ped Committee would be really welcome. So thank you for thinking about that.
Thanks, Jessica.
Hi, Audrey from MPC. Also on the bike ped train here. Just wanted to make sure that the climate committee that you're forming includes bike ped representation and not only electric vehicles, because the mode shift is such an important part of that. So wanted to flag that. And then also in terms of the bipartisan infrastructure law and all the funds coming, is there going to be an opportunity for agencies that are planning to submit grant applications to coordinate? Is that something that CMAP could convene in terms of agencies? Multiple agencies could apply for RAISE grants or other flexible grants. There are a lot of different programs. I think we all know that usually multiple projects are not funded in the same metro area. If 5 projects go in, they won't all get funded, and we will do much better if we kind of all get behind different regional projects of significance. So is there an opportunity for agencies to share their planned list of projects for those different funding categories with CMAP, with perhaps this group, and there be some process for coming to consensus on what those projects would be? And obviously that the timing is all over the place when the NOFOs come out and you only have a limited amount of time. So you want to do that sooner rather than later, and ideally before the NOFOs come out. But just it seems like, and that also intersects with, you had made a comment about projects of regional significance, and of course that new list is coming out for Onto 2050 update as well. So it seems like there are intersections there that could be beneficial in terms of developing consensus.
Thanks, Audrey.
Aaron, one more too, I think kind of ties into the EJA topic as well, but I agree and with everything else everyone said too. I mean, those are definitely things we're got our fingers on the pulse and concerned with up in Lake County, is the resiliency, the EV, bike ped are certainly big things. Like grade separations and freight too for us, and just trying to unpack everything in general with EJA, I think would be helpful, but that's something too that kind of ties into system reliability. And we hear that a lot from our residents and motorists and stuff up in Lake County, is just trying to get more grade separations or strategic ones, critical ones too. So I think if that can be tied into the the EJA working group or some of those fund sources, I think would be something worth consideration too.
Yeah, no, and I think that's directly in line with some of those programmatic, right? There are more resources for some of these grade crossings. And I think too, just the prioritization, going back to the prioritization process that we did a couple of years ago on grade separations across the region, and maybe, talking with you all about the data and how we did that, and if that's something that we could do on other projects, would be great. So thanks for raising that. Okay, well, we are still framing all of this out. I will take all of this information back, but I think, again, all of these comments are in line with some of the places that we've been really thinking that might be strategic areas for us to get engaged. So I appreciate that's alignment is naturally occurring here. So we'll bring this back next month, and I think again we'll be reaching out to some of you individually to hear a little bit more about what the needs might be and who might want to be involved.
All right, great. Thank you, Erin. Thanks for that great update. All right, let's go ahead and move on to 603, crowd and AI tools to map, analyze, and visualize sidewalk accessibility for inclusive cities. And for this one, we will have Yochai Eisenberg and Sierra Berquist. Up to you, Yochai.
All right, thanks very much. I'm going to try to show my screen here. Do you all see a PowerPoint?
We do.
We do. Great. Thanks. All right, well, thanks for taking some time to listen to our project and introduce this project to you. I'm a professor in the Department of Disability and Human Development at UIC, and I'll be presenting with Sierra Berquist, who is a master's student in the Department of Urban Planning and Policy. And yeah, the title of our grant, which we'll be presenting about, is called Crowd and AI Tools to Map, Analyze, and Visualize Sidewalk Accessibility for Inclusive Cities. And this is a neat project in that it's an NSF grant that was focused on smart and connected cities. And so it was a neat opportunity to both develop new technology and apply it in the real world to ensure that it's applicable and making a difference. We were able to incorporate lots of great partners and a great research team into this project, several of whom are on this committee and who will be involved in helping to steer the direction of this project. We're working in collaboration with the computer science team at the University of Washington for this project. So to give you a little bit of background on why this project, what purpose does it serve? The impetus was, the numerous pedestrian barriers experienced by people with disabilities in the Chicago area and really nationally. In addition to those barriers that, importantly for transportation, right, prevent walking and wheeling on sidewalks for the first and last mile, and just to be able to walk and wheel around your community. So in addition to that, the problem in terms of where we're at with data, which I think was shared in the respect earlier by other kinds of data, right? That you just don't have this data, it's not readily available. There is a large lack of data on pedestrian infrastructure and accessibility throughout most cities, county governments in the US. In addition, there's a lack of planning and implementation for barrier removal, or what we call planning for ADA transition plans. And this was a gap identified in a report that we co-wrote with MPC called Where the Sidewalk Ends, where we identified that only about 11% of communities in the region had one of these ADA transition plans. In case you're unfamiliar with this, an ADA transition plan is required under Title II of the ADA for local governments with 50 or more employees. And the ADA transition plan is really important because it provides an understanding of what the current conditions are, and then it lays out the plan for improvement by including what the methods are for removing those barriers, when that will happen, who's responsible, and pretty critically, what are the priorities that the public thinks need to be improved first, because as we know, not everything can be improved next year. It's going to take 15 to 20 years in most communities. But knowing what those priorities are critical to help enable more inclusive cities. So what does this project do? The aims of this project are to develop and evaluate a suite of open source sidewalk accessibility analysis and visualization tools. These tools can then be used to assist urban planners and transit agencies in development of their ADA transition plans. And this is something that we've heard in our interviews and conversations with ADA coordinators around the country. It's really a large undertaking to be able to map and audit the sidewalk infrastructure and its accessibility. And we're trying to help bridge that gap. In addition, we're seeking to enable pedestrian and disability advocates to examine geospatial patterns of inaccessibility and review government progress. We also hope these tools can help people with disabilities make safe and accessible mobility decisions. So let's get into what the tool looks like so you can have a better understanding, and I'll turn it over to Sierra for this part.
Yeah, thanks, Yohai. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tool called Project Sidewalk. Oh, if we could go back to the slide, one slide back. So Project Sidewalk is a free and open source tool that combines online mapping imagery from Google Street View with a remote crowdsourcing interface that allows anyone interested to label and validate accessibility features in the pedestrian environment, which then builds on a machine learning or AI to map and assess sidewalk accessibility on a grander scale. Next slide. So we're going to run through a quick demo. With Project Sidewalk, online crowd workers are given a game-like mission to label and assess sidewalk accessibility by virtually walking through the city streets using GSV, similar to an first-person video game. So here we are labeling a surface problem. We click on the appropriate label type, rate the problem severity, and then enter a description if necessary. And as of now, the tool is focused on 3 main areas: sidewalks, curb cuts, and obstacles or barriers in a path. But we'll be adding 2 additional features soon, crosswalks and pedestrian signals. So stay tuned for that. We can go to the next slide. So far, Project Sidewalk has collected 650,000 labels with 235,000 validations. And we've started preliminary mapping of 4 neighborhoods within the city of Chicago, as well as 4 Chicago suburbs. And we believe that this is the largest open source sidewalk accessibility data set in existence. And because the project is well beyond proof of concept, we hope that in the future, this data will be used for important planning in Chicago and areas beyond Chicago. Next slide. So a key component to the project is the development of co-design workshops. And these workshops will bring together key stakeholders, including people with mobility disabilities, disability advocates or caretakers, ADA coordinators, urban planners, and city officials. And we'll be asking these participants to discuss the utility of sidewalk accessibility data and mapping tools for advocacy or everyday trip planning, and then hopefully ADA transition planning. And the evaluation of the workshops will be used to better understand participants' experience with accessibility and data collection tools and their just general knowledge and attitudes towards these tools. Next slide. So through this process, we think that this data collection tool will have the potential to be used to better inform inclusive city development by transforming how sidewalk data is collected and analyzed, and evaluating how cities plan for pedestrian improvements, and then the dispersal of infrastructure funding. Next slide. So how can you become involved? There are a few ways you can become involved in the project. You can become a pilot community, which in this case, we would ask that you would have a vested interest in using the data Project Sidewalk produces and potentially use it towards the development of your city's ADA transition plan. You could become a contact for us. You could link us up with other community stakeholders, or simply just discussing accessibility data needs within your organization or your community is also really helpful to get the word out. And if you have any questions for us, we'd love to hear your feedback and regarding the tool or the research as a whole.
Great, thank you, Yohai and Sierra. That's very interesting. This is a great project, and I know we have a couple of staff involved in it at RTA. Just one question for you. You mentioned on the last slide opportunities for people to get involved. If they want to do so, should they reach out to you directly, or are there other ways for people to submit interest?
Yeah, I would reach out to us directly. That way we can get you on lists for these workshops, or if you want to have individual conversations, be happy to discuss. I also put in the chat the link to the kind of pilot deployment of the tool, just so in case you wanted to take a look and play around with the current version that we'll be using in our workshops as a way to engage people in understanding what this tool is and then shaping what it can become going forward.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Yohai or Sierra from the group?
Yeah, this is Jessica, Chris Snyder, DuPage. Just a question, as an agency that went through an ADA transition plan. I'm assuming we had one, but we couldn't find it, so we did another one. So, I mean, we have 200 miles of sidewalk that we walked with a level. We measured every fault because that's the level of detail we felt was required in the transition plan, and then identified and will program, you know, systematic improvements to address any barriers, gaps, et cetera, in the network. So the one thing we did spend quite a bit of time is talking to our legal counsel. Once we do this and have this, does this, you know, not having one is more of an issue than having one, but you got to show progress to it. So it sounds like a lot of what this effort is more of a visual, you know, a Google walkthrough. And so is the focus really to identify the gaps in the system and where we need to fill? Because if my concern is some people may interpret this to be my data self-evaluation and then develop their transition plan around it, which is missing a lot of information on faults and cross slopes and those things. So I just maybe get a better understanding of what this is supposed to springboard into, so that municipalities, when the data is out there, you know, maybe aren't in a position of being, I didn't know that was there, and yes, you did because we did this study.
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of really good issues. I think that we're trying to discuss in our workshops and gain a better understanding for among ADA transition plan coordinators. And one of the issues you're bringing up is kind of the level of detail of measurement that's required for an ADA transition plan. Talking with FHWA officials and the guidance that I've been understood is that a self-evaluation isn't required to be done in person. The inventory isn't required to specifically measure every single slope and cross slope of the pedestrian infrastructure. And as such, you know, what we've seen in our work and in the review of numerous plans around the country is that people use a whole variety of different kinds of approaches to collecting that data. And so, yeah, part of, so I would say that part of what we're trying to understand is how, this level of data of crowdsourcing can be used by local municipalities for their ADA transition planning or other kinds of planning, and perhaps within different parts of that planning as well. We also think that there's opportunities for kind of the combination of using these tools and using more in-person measurement tools as well. And that I think is going to come through these workshop discussions and through those conversations with ADA coordinators to gain a better understanding. But we think these tools can be used, and they have been used in other cities to help identify those gaps, help focus on priority areas, and kind of create that holistic image, right, of a city as a whole. Many of the communities that we talk to and the plans that we see often focus on like one area of a city, or can only, if they hire a consultant, they can only pay for this quarter of their city. And so being able to map out the city as a whole and understand those inequities in the infrastructure across the city, I think is part of the picture that this tool could help employ.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I would just advocate, I don't know when these workshops come up what the outreach is going to be, but I know we have our own ADA coordinator here at DuPage. I'm sure many others do, and I just want to make sure that we have that opportunity to be engaged in those workshops and to share our information, as well as get feedback from or participate in your process. So thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'd love for them to be part of this. We're working with the Mayor's Caucus, who has an ADA coordinators working group to help in that outreach and dissemination. But then also, beyond that group, we're also, working with IDOT and their ADA coordinator to be able to reach out to as many folks as we can. So thanks for that, Christopher.
Yeah, thanks for that. Any other questions for Yohai or Sierra?
Jessica, I got one quick one here, and it's kind of a long shot, but is this when you log into this app and kind of plug it in there, is it kind of just like a point that it picks up and one person logs it in, or is it connecting or collecting like continuous data? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, we struggle to capture, pedestrian and bike ADT on the system. So I didn't know if it was kind of getting constant probe data through the cell phone and something that could be also used for that, or is it just someone logs into the app, plugs in their location for a gap or something like that and then logs back off? So just kind of curious.
Sure. Yeah. Good question. So it uses the most recent Google Street View data. So it doesn't use any live or live data streams. But potentially something like this where kind of the combination of crowd and AI, so using AI but also using humans to verify what AI is doing, could be a great opportunity for the ADT measurements, I think. Yeah, so maybe, kind of think of this as also a way of, testing out these approaches, these processes that could potentially be used for other kinds of data that are not out there currently, that take a long time to collect.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great question. All right, any other questions? All right, well, good luck with your project and keep us up to date on how it goes.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us. All right, let's move on to item 6.4, legislative update. It's actually my understanding that there is not a legislative update today, but that Tim and Anthony are available if anyone has any questions. So do we have any questions for Tim or Anthony? No? All right, let's go ahead and move on to item 7, other business. Is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward to the group? No other business. Everyone's getting ready for lunch. Moving on to public comments. Do we have any public comments, Lindsay?
Let's see, it looks like somebody might have their hand raised. I'm trying to check that. Yeah, oh, Garland is on.
All right. Let's go ahead and allow him to unmute himself.
Yes, Garland Armstrong from Des Moines. How's everybody doing there in
Hi,
Chicago?
Garland. We're doing all right.
Yeah.
We got a little snow last night. We're doing well. How are you?
Yeah, we did too. We had like 5 inches here in Des Moines. Yeah, and just want y'all to know that this past Wednesday I turned 56 years old, and it was a great birthday for me. And also too, I saw on Tuesday on the ABC 7 Chicago app that really hurts me and Heather is that the Canadian National and the Canadian Pacific is going to have the freight train from Canada all the way to Mexico. It's going to affect the communities, like including Itasca, where the Milwaukee District West line goes through there, going from Elgin to Chicago. It really makes me hurt how they're doing this, and Metro's really up in smoke about this, and me and Heather is up in smoke about what are they thinking of, and this is going to really make us feel like that they just feel like they're going to go ahead and do their dirty tactics. So that's why I'm directly, me and my wife, strongly opposing of this, and I agree with Metra, and I think y'all should look at the data to see if they're going to go ahead and do it. Make sure to keep it up and see why are they doing this, even during overnights, and it's going to affect every different residence where they are at in the community. So making sure that we need to make sure that, are they going to try to see how many hours they're going to have the freight train running, or they're going to keep on doing this on and on? So we need to make sure about it. And also too, I'm glad about the ADA transition thing right there, not only there, but nationwide. So I think we're trying to get one here too in Des Moines, but it's like a slow, tedious processing system, how to get one here for Des Moines, especially not enough sidewalks, especially and for people with disabilities, and sometimes they even have to walk in the streets or something like that. So we need enough to make sure for Iowa. So if you can send us some good like data information about it, how we can, since I'll be on the Access Advisory Board starting June 14th of this year, going through June 14th of 2026, and also to for starting for the first terms of it, I'm going to be doing it for the first 4 present terms of it. So this will probably help out. So it's not only needed, but especially seniors too hard disabled needs more information and more ideas about how we can use that to implement it here in Iowa. So
Yeah.
so
Okay.
just want y'all to know about it and making sure that what we can do to make sure to be extremely well prepared for this one.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Garland, for both of those pieces of input. And we'll have staff reach out to you for more information about the project that CMAP's been doing related to the ADA transition plans. Thank you for that.
All right.
Do we have any other? Take care there in Iowa.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Any other public comment, Lindsay?
No.
No.
We did not.
All right. All right, let's go on to item 9. Next meeting will be April 29th, 2022. So we're on to adjournment. Seeing no other business before the committee, I will just take a voice vote to adjourn.
Aye.
All in favor? Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Good weekend, everyone.
Bye
Thanks,
now.
everyone.